What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin, but nonetheless, to go ahead and get it started here, first off on the 4-hour chart, I want to briefly point out again the progression here along the descending what was resistance. Obviously going back to here, we saw the end of the first week of August Bitcoin move above this resistance zone all the way up to more price discovery, new all-time high set at basically $124.5 thousand, and then just as we saw the price come up here, almost an equivalent and proportional move to the downside back to this, what was this resistance zone here. So far we're seeing, most notably right here, these two support points finalizing or culminating rather in the move here, this brief short-lived move, although highly volatile, up to basically around $117,000 or so. Ever since then, we've been seeing potentially what some would label as weekend manipulation, or just kind of general less strong price behavior on the weekend. As we can see, Bitcoin come back down here and hit this same exact zone. So far, as you can see, going back to August 19th, it's acted as support. So this could be really the point of where we saw this broken. Now we're coming down and finding support along this, which is also lining up with this horizontal zone of support that has been held since the beginning of August. Zooming out even further, we've kind of really seen perhaps something very similar to this, where we saw horizontal level support here. There's a minor deviation here, but ultimately we saw Bitcoin move up to a new horizontal level here, where this zone here potentially is turned into what we're seeing right here, where this deviation in this instance is going to be something akin to right here. So, and you can also see that this got very close right here to the 800 EMA, and this is something that we're seeing again, where we're seeing the price encroach closer and closer to this. So we might see Bitcoin in this context move down to the 800 EMA, which right now sits at basically $108.2 thousand. Also, generally with this vector zone here as well, that can be fully or just more recovered than it has been so far. Zooming out even further, going back to, let's see here, the end of the first week of April, ever since then, Bitcoin hitting around $74,000. We've seen it move up to the new all-time high of rounding it up approximately $25,000. We can see how once the 800 EMA was broken right here, we've seen Bitcoin kind of, again, like I said, kind of stair-step, gradually move upwards here, and again, we might see another retest of that 800 EMA. The 800 EMA has been quite important on the 4-hour. You can see here that once the 4-hour candle was closed below this, we then entered the descending local low zone here, which then saw Bitcoin, again, like I said, move up $225,000. We saw this initial relief support here back up into kind of this all-time high, or what was an all-time high, now a local high range here. Saw Bitcoin close below here, again, the 800 EMA, and we just saw this kind of serpentine, this intertwined weighting with the 800 EMA. And you can see right here, we could qualify these as some rough support, or just characterize right here as a flipping of the 800 EMA back into support, just to see the price above. So obviously you see here moving up to the prior all-time high zone of around $108,000 to $109,000. Even going back even further, the 800 EMA has been very important. We can see this rough approximate retest here, where we saw support just short above it, and then we saw Bitcoin move all the way up to $74,000 or so. Again, even going back to this first major sideways corrective period, you can see that the 800 EMA has rough support here. And we saw the close below the 800 EMA, a descending local low zone. We saw the price start to move up, was trading around, intertwining with the 800 EMA. And then finally, as it was going up here towards that $75,000 target, eventually at highest of that move, ending here around mid-March 2024. You can see that the 800 EMA has been important in the context of support, whether that's right along it, or just a bit above it, or kind of just in this serpentine, this like it's trading around it, intertwined with it, and eventually we see the price maintain stability above that 800 EMA. So that's something that I'm looking out for over the next few weeks, rest of this month, leading into next month. You can also see, zooming out here to at earliest, basically around, just say November 2024, that the 272 right here, this blue Fibonacci level, has been very important. Essentially since the bounce back here at around 75,000. We do obviously see a minor deviation below. It's not a perfect support, but essentially this 272 is kind of the median, where you see these, you know, for example, here and here, these deviations below, but really this 272 is kind of acting as the staple, that center line of it. But ever since back here during early April, moving into the recent upswings we've seen of late, you can see here that 272 has been very important. Now, zooming back into the last number of days, you can see that this 272 has acted as support once more as we're seeing Bitcoin trickle down lower and lower here. We could be seeing some, especially if we see the price close a bit lower below both of these two, basically just the kind of closes that make up this horizontal support here, we would see perhaps, and right now there's some degree of bullish divergence building up here. So this again could be indicating that either, you know, Bitcoin is going to bottom out here and continue to move higher, more so into price discovery, or see one more move down to the EMA, you know, best case scenario to not go down too much lower. If we look here at the 12-hour chart, we will notice that the RSI here has been flatlined along this zone, going all the way back, really, if we see here, this first sideways zone here. This is how Bitcoin moved to the next level up. Now we're seeing another sideways zone here, where this support here could be synonymous to what we're seeing here, with really this here and this here would be synonymous to these two lows here. You can see that this low also came down to the 200 EMA, just as what has happened within the last 2 days or so within this this downside associated with the current weekend. And if we, let's say that we see Bitcoin have a kind of a rapid, you know, maybe we see some sort of V-shaped recovery, or we just see something akin to coming below here, the some scenarios where we see the price go below the 200 EMA, perhaps meet this vector zone, find support. Likely, unless we would see the RSI building upwards to denote some bullish divergence. If we see the RSI come down to this purple zone right around here, even if it just touches the very top of it, this is the purple zone on the 12-hour chart. It's going to be correlated with each of these vertical purple lines you see, but every single time, as you can see, like for example here, there's on a vertical line, but here, the first time that RSI reached it was literally right at the bottom of the prior bear market. You can see here, back in mid-March, you can see that was an important local low here up to 31,000. Here, another local low back in roughly mid-August here, going to here also August of 2024, as opposed to back here was August 2023. We saw another low as well with the RSI reaching this zone. So if we see the RSI come down just, you know, close to it and closer to it than it already is, hits the very top of it, something very similar to these two instances right here, spanning from August of 2024 to March of 2025, that is going to be, to me, quite a good sign in a bullish sense. Now, what we could potentially see is, for example, in this instance, we saw the price continue to trickle lower as the RSI built upwards. So we could see the price here on Bitcoin trickle lower and lower and lower, maybe back down to this horizontal level here, somewhere down to just approximately $100,000, while we see the RSI either build up in bullish divergence or continue to go lower here, down to this most oversold zone in the 12-hour. Either scenario, I think, is going to be quite bullish. I think at this point, just generally, especially psychologically, if we see Bitcoin hold $100,000, that's going to be really the kind of the best case scenario when it comes to not a total, situation that it really starts to induce a bunch of fear and panic in the market. Like, for example, such as if we see Bitcoin lose $100,000, which is somewhere kind of just right here in this zone. If we see Bitcoin come down and lose this zone here and continue to go lower and not manage to hold the 800 EMA somewhere right here, just maintaining above 90 to 95,000, then we see Bitcoin continue to come lower and lower, come down to this vector zone associated with the local load around 74 to 76,000, and eventually lose this and continue to go lower and lower. Then I think at that point, especially because there would then be this massive M pattern right here that I've been pointing out, it would break the neckline here, and we'd see, I think it was somewhere upwards to like a 30% drop towards the downside, which would take the price, see around 20%, which I think it's probably closer to 30%, like I said, but 20% will take it down to 62,000, pushing 30% will take it down to 53,000. So I mean, at worst case scenario, we'd see a retest if that M pattern plays out, retesting this horizontal level back here at around approximately 50 to 55,000. Now, Also, something that I haven't brought up in a while, but was bringing up for some time, a number of months ago. If you look back in historical all-time history of Bitcoin, and when you start to see Bitcoin transitioning from a bull market to a bear market, that is typically associated with around a 42, just approximately speaking, like give or take a percent or so, 42% lower. Typically, whenever you start to see that form or the degree of retracement, or worse, is when the bear market has already began and has had, in hindsight, whatever high it had set before that drop was the all-time high of that bull run. So if we do see, again, something to bring it, which I haven't brought up in a while, actually now taking it from the top here, pushing this zone right here, which I mentioned, which would be breaking the M neckline here. This is a 38% drop. So if we see this drop already right here of 38% just to reach the neckline of the M, and then by the time we reach the neckline of this M, then drop another, even if it's just 10% towards the downside here, 20 or even down to 30 down here to around 53, 54, $50,000 or so, then ultimately at that point from here the top with the recent all-time high set, this would be a move of, pushing, like I said, 61,000 earlier, around more close to like a 20-25% drop would be a 50% move. Pushing down to on $52,000 or so would be a 57% move. So at that point, thinking about this historical criteria of around a 42% drop or more being an indication of the fact that the bull run's over and the bear market has began, if we do see, I think, the loss of this horizontal support here at around 74 to 76,000 on, obviously here as I'm going over the 12-hour, more specifically within like the daily or bi-daily going, especially up to the weekly, we start to see that, then I think, I personally, and I think probably likely with a lot of other people as well, if I had to make an educated guess, we'll start to shift. Those people who have been far more bullish, like myself, are still expecting farther or more significant gains towards the upside, towards 150,000, 200,000 or higher. We'll start to shift towards the fact that this may be, for example, we saw a double top here and a single double top very similar to 2020 to 2021. But as of right now, I still do not place myself in that camp until we actually start to see significant indication that Bitcoin is wanting to find rejection here at this level at around $74,000 to $76,000 and find rejection here and continue to go lower and lower. If we look here at this daily chart, this uptrend zone has been lost. It's currently, the price is just a tad bit below the 50 EMA. Could generally just find some support here and continue higher. If we look down here at the RSI, the fib level that's been holding up as support is the 382 after there was this initial downside here. If you look at the price, it was descending, RSI was moving upwards. We saw that bullish divergence. Ever since then, like I said, this 382 is holding, so we might see again, how we saw this horizontal trading here, and then another leg up to a new level. We might see another horizontal session here. We may be reaching the end of it, and then another leg up towards finally hitting $130,000 and higher. But also, there's definitely the opportunity that we see Bitcoin come down to 200 EMA here at around 103.5 thousand, maybe with some licks lower down to close to 100,000. See the RSI move down to the 272, maybe even down to the 0.09 and 0.147, lining up with what happened back here, and we see the prices here. Back in this instance, where the price would be here, we would see essentially some exaggerated hidden bullish divergence where the RSI has reset itself back down to the same levels, but we're seeing the overall price here ascending towards the upside, which is, like I said, going to be a bullish sign in the context of hidden bullish divergence. When it comes to really this ascending zone, more so before getting back above this ascending zone, it's going to be very important to obviously see Bitcoin get back above the prior all-time highs, finally pushing close or right to $125,000 and higher, extending this zone out, depending upon when Bitcoin continues to go up. It's totally possible we see another move up here, something along these lines, and we see Bitcoin push towards $130,000, which is where this zone here would be sometime around like mid to late September. And then we see the price push up to this and then still get rejected and continue to go lower as well. Obviously there's plenty of things that could play out here. I'm just really trying to go over as many situations and circumstances as possible so as to give as best as I can an even unbiased analysis, in the sense that I'm covering not only bullish scenarios, but bearish scenarios that may execute and initiate the next bear market. Now, if we look here at this buy daily or this 2-day chart, one of the things that I specifically mentioned in one of the last 2 or so, I believe, Bitcoin videos was that if we look here at the RSI, you can see that it's been trading sideways here within a rough mid zone, the neutral zone of the RSI, with a slight deviation towards the upside or an oversold condition, but generally it's been trading right here in the median, essentially conveying a state of ambiguity or neutrality where it's, it could just as likely go up, see the price appreciate, and it could just likely go down and see the price depreciate. As we see here, the price is coming back down to the 200 EMA, or rather, my bad, the 50 EMA in its band, just as happened back here in late June. And we can also again see that we're seeing a very similar type of downside. We set those 2 peaks, we set these 2 lows here, with the second low being lower, and the RSI clearly looks very similar as well, where what I specifically pointed out was that we saw the RSI here peak out at the same horizontal level. For this instance, we saw it cross below the moving average line here with the RSI and the Bollinger Bands, come back up to SO, rejection down lower, and we saw something very, very similar, if not borderline identical, except for this brief cross of the RSI above this moving average and then a rejection down, actually even lower than this instance here. So we're seeing a descending support currently, whereas the price is obviously ascending, so there's some hidden bullish evidence playing out there, especially if we see the RSI move with strength back up here and we see the price continue to go higher further and further in a price discovery. So what we could be seeing here is this play out, as I pointed out, being that this move here was around a 12% move, and I was entertaining the idea that from here, this most recent high down 12% would put the price back again, finding support along the 50 EMA and its band, and we're seeing the RSI reflect this as well, along with now seeing that hidden bullish divergence, which is further, I think, conveying a positivity and affirmation towards seeing Bitcoin find support along this zone. Might go a little bit lower down to the bottom of the band, maybe even look a little bit lower down, like under 4,000 or so. And then, as always, there is the macro ascending support zone that is lifted up this bull run for the entirety of the time. The 2 most recent retests here have been towards the upper portion, so that would be anywhere from around, like I said, somewhere around $104,000, $102,000 or so, down to the lowermost portion, which is lining up with the 200 EMA, would be somewhere around like $95,000 approximately, give or take a few $1,000s, to have room for those wicks or whatever, the intricacies that may happen if we do actually see the price come down that low in the first place. Now, looking here at the weekly chart, one of the biggest things I want to update and emphasize in my own personal view of the market, one of the things that I have been paying attention to is the 13 estimated moving average, which is going to be the red EMA. Let me get off a few of these things here so we can see it a bit more clearly here. So we see this red EMA that's essentially during each of these moves here for the price here, here, and here. You can notice that the 13 EMA has been the support each of these times, where the median support here between these 2 legs of this first overall move here was found support on the 13 EMA. If we look at this overall large move, this median correction also found support moving into the second leg of this overall move. And we can see that during these periods of correction here and here is when we see periods of the, for example, here and here, the price going below, closing below on the weekly, the 13 EMA. For example, here we saw this initial support, but then we saw this weekly close below towards the end of June. We saw Bitcoin then go all the way back down to basically just approximately $50,000. Eventually, you can see here, it reclaimed the 13 EMA, held it all the way up until the point that it had hit 108, 109,000 going into the roughly the last 2 weeks or so of February. We saw another weekly close below the 13 EMA, bringing the price from $95,500 all the way down to around $74,300. Since then, we saw the 13 EMA here reclaim once more, and it's been support each and every single time thus far. So this is going to be very important, in my opinion, to not see the current weekly candle. I would have to, to extrapolate, imagine that if we do, or if we are going to see a close of the weekly candles below the 13 EMA here, then more likely than not, it will happen either in the current weekly candle, which has 6 days, 21 hours left, or in the next weekly candle. So basically, if we do see this, I think it'll happen sometime either going into the end of this month, August, or into early September. Although if you do think about the historical nature of quarter four, as we're getting closer and closer into quarter four, I mean, at this point, we're basically, 2/3 of the way done with Q3. November or October rather will be the beginning of Q4, and typically Q4s are very bullish historically, although this time around it's definitely warranted to say that things are different with the institutional interest and adoption, the growing nation state, whether it's in America or intercontinentally, adoption and integration, and this interest, its acknowledgement of Bitcoin and blockchain solutions in terms of like alternative blockchain solutions abroad, Ethereum, Cardano, XYO, whatever else, Solana, is we're seeing is one of the things I've really been emphasizing outside of the charts recently, because really at this point I think there's should be less invested interest on the charts rather than the fundamental landscape, with the fact if you think about the adoption curve of technologies of being S-curves, eventually at some point you see that major inflection point down towards the infancy, and it just goes borderline vertical. I've showed the chart displaying a number of those technologies in that type of growth plenty of times, and given the fact that we are seeing that, there's still definitely the possibility that we either will hold this 13 EMA, have a strong technical landscape, have it along obviously the strong fundamental landscape, and see Bitcoin continue to go higher, or given the amount of choppiness, like for example here, we've seen this kind of this gradual stair stepping. It's been boring a lot of people. It's been borderline agonizing, obviously. So compared to past bull run iterations of Bitcoin, where it's just face melting, mind blowingly, overwhelmingly just volatile, buck wild to the upside. And this time around, it's been very different. Now it's totally still possible that we see the close below this 13 EMA. And each time that's happened, we've seen a move back down to the 50 EMA, such as there, here, and then obviously here was this entire price was just entrenched in the band, because this is really during the early moments of this current bull run where it had to cement support along this 50 EMA and then break above it and continue to find support, such as it did here, and may or may not again do the same thing here and come down to a range anywhere from around 88,000 all the way up to around 100,000. So that's definitely possible. Now that would be, if we do see another, some more prolonged correction or downside, that would be the best case scenario. That's towards the worst end of the spectrum. So seeing something like this and finding support here and continuing to go higher, rather than having this major scare where we see the price here forming this potential ascending M or double top. We see it come down to the neckline, test people's limits as farthest as they can go in terms of an emotional, psychological stance, and also a technical stance, because of the importance I pointed out of not going below this neckline here. And so we might see Bitcoin come down and test this neckline and then bounce here. Again, like I said, just pushing people to their absolute limits, emotionally, psychologically, and technically speaking. I think that would make a lot of sense as well, due to the nature of the current bull run, as I pointed out, with the choppiness and the gradual stair stepping, the potential, the notion of this more invested, this, higher degree of manipulation associated with the powers that be and the shadow hands that exist up at the upper echelon of society, like the 1% of the 1%, just the top 1%, the top percentage of people that have all the money, that are obviously manipulating things like Wall Street in America, or just think about all of the people and the important elites, especially like the World Economic Forum and just governments and socio-political realms across the world, sticking their hands into the markets and obviously influencing them to a significant degree due to the amount of power that they possess within the world. So moving here to this weekly chart again, we see the M2 chart that I've been going over, the global M2 here, recently finding a bounce upwards. Right now it seems to be tapering off and orienting itself back towards the downside. So again, this has been the longest, most choppy correction so far of this entire move up for the M2. So what we could be potentially seeing here is some distribution phasing here at the peaks. For example, in the case that perhaps the M2 here is topped out, here we're going to see the M2 drop down over the next, really I think the rest of this year, maybe going into very early 2026. We'll see Bitcoin continue to come up higher here, break 150, heading towards 200,000, towards 230, 250,000, maybe even higher. Again, who knows what's going to happen, but I lean towards a camp of around 180 or so to around $230,000, $250,000. So this is again something I think that's very important to monitor, just because of the amount of the high degree of correlation we've seen. As I pointed out, the purple here on the M2, each of these purple periods here denote when Bitcoin is in correlation with the M2, and this one shorter term orange period here denotes that one small window of time where we saw a decorrelation, where we saw the M2 going down there, as you can see, and here on Bitcoin it was going up during that period of time. Outside of that, here on this weekly chart, one of the big things I've been watching and monitoring since at earliest around December of last year, 2024, going into January of this year, 2025, is this resistance here, which I believe is about a year and a half long at this point. Not only do we see this descending resistance of a year and a half here, but we've seen the support zone here, almost a perfect flat line of support going all the way back to January 2023, right at the beginning of the bull market here. The RSI has found support on each of these major moves up here in this bull run for the price, right along the same horizontal zone here, which corresponds to the 236, or just if you want to broaden that to make a range, of 236 to 272, if I were to overlay a Fibonacci retracement on top of this. And right now we've seen Bitcoin trading right here within the median of these two yellow horizontal lines since late April, basically the beginning of May of this year. And I think whenever we see, obviously if we do see it, assuming the bear market has not begun, and that Bitcoin is actually, in truth here, especially in hindsight, as we begin to see over the next few months, if $124,000 approximately if that was the all-time high, then clearly this resistance here is going to recognize and acknowledge the fact that we're seeing a double bullish divergence, or rather a double bearish divergence here with respect to the RSI, indicating that all-time high of the current bull run, or, which is something, again, obviously I still lean to. I think this is going to break, and I think when this breaks, there's going to be significant amounts of volume and volatility backing up this next move here, especially if we do indeed see Bitcoin move all the way up to right around here by sometime Q4, maybe early 2026, towards 180,000, which would be somewhere around here, pushing up towards 230,000 would be somewhere around here, 250,000 somewhere around here. And again, that could totally happen. Like if it happens exactly like this trajectory here, we would see Bitcoin push up to around $250,000 by the end of this year, which I think is definitely feasible. I think it's valid. I don't think it's too, overly unreasonably bullish, such as it starts to get. I think I've seen people entertaining the idea of, Bitcoin's going to go to $500,000 this time around, or maybe even $1 million. We're going to see an extended bull run because of the fundamental landscape and this increasing institutional interest in adoption with BlackRock and all these US-based spot Bitcoin ETFs and everything else that I've mentioned in recent videos, and I'm sure a lot of you are already well aware of, is going on as we see the exponential increase of the adoption of Bitcoin within the real world, for it, being properly acknowledged for what it is, and also the alternative blockchain solutions abroad. We're seeing even Ethereum is setting new all-time highs recently as well. Bitcoin dominance is continuing to tank. So, we could very well be in this moment of the final thrust for Bitcoin. As we're seeing Ethereum break its all-time highs, it'll start to front-run the rest of the altcoins. That is, Ethereum will front-run the rest of the altcoins as it typically has. Or perhaps, it's still possible as well that we see Bitcoin's topped out here and it's entering its bear market, as we're going to see altcoins initiate alt season, beginning with Ethereum, most notably, and we will see a rapid alt season over the next, maybe 2 to 4 months or so, a very just quick, parabolic, borderline vertical alt season that's very short-lived, and then it very quickly begins to come down due to the fact that Bitcoin's already topped out and it had already been going down. But my leaning is that that's not more likely than not. We'll see Bitcoin have one more final move up as we start to see alt season begin, as Bitcoin is in this final thrust. So we also have to realize, as I've said plenty of times in recent videos, and I'll get to some of these indicators that I'm about to speak about later on in this video, but nearly all on-chain indicators that have historically indicated and signaled all-time high peaks for Bitcoin in past bull run iterations, almost none of them have signaled and met the criteria, the requirements necessary for that all-time high indication. The pi cycle indicator has not topped out, has not signaled yet, and various other ones which I said I'll get to. But if we look here at this weekly chart, if I pull up the volume here, and if I can remember exactly where I put this, somewhere around, let's see, yeah, it's right around here. Whenever we've seen the volume get above this horizontal line that I displaced, it's correlated with each of these. For example, this zone here in between these two turquoise, these vertical lines you see on the chart here. You can see each time we see the volume get above this yellow line down here, it's associated, has been associated with each of them, the largest moves for the bull run so far. Really, I mean, just correlating with the first leg here, second leg here, and then this first run up of this overall second leg right here, which I believe, or rather the third leg. So we see the first leg here, second leg here, and then this right here going higher, assuming it does so, will be the third and final leg, structuring it like a 5-staged impulse in terms of the bull market structure. So as soon as we start to see the volume here tick up and get above that threshold that I mentioned that correlates with each of these prior volatile moves, likely we'll start to see Bitcoin here moving back up to this specific ascending resistance. Mainly it's a resistance slash support trend line, but for the purposes here, it's mainly being used as a resistance that needs to be broken. As you can see here, it's correlated with the beginning of each of these zones that I pointed out here. When we see the price here, these candles close above it, that has initiated each of these moves here. Again, as you can't really emphasize more on this chart. And you can see that with these recent two peaks here, it's acted as resistance. So this is showing it's still important. It's still an important trend line in terms of resistance, but also in terms of acknowledged as support as well. You can see it was support here, and support here. So it's going to be very important to see Bitcoin get back above. And if it meets the ascending trend line here for these peaks so far, then we could see, if Bitcoin tops out by like later October, Bitcoin would push upwards towards $300,000 if it's going to meet this upper trend line here again. And it's obviously, as time goes on, the longer Bitcoin takes a top out, it's going to continue to go higher and higher if it is indeed going to meet this uppermost trend line, which, I mean, let's say the bull run is extended and it meets this trend line here, as it has, like I've said, throughout the, at the end of this first leg, the end of the second leg, we're now in the third leg. If it tops out, hits this line again sometime like March of next year, we'd see Bitcoin upwards towards $415,000 to $420,000. And again, that'd be, I mean, it would say we see Bitcoin extend towards mid to late like next year, we would see Bitcoin reaching $500,000 and higher, which, I mean, I definitely think that's possible. Again, especially with the fundamental landscape, we could see a bull run that is potentially quite similar to 2017 here, where it just kept, by the time it got right here, a lot of people were probably already beginning to scale out to some degree. Some people were probably already, obviously, so calling the bull market to be off, and then it continued to go higher. And really the most volatile, run of this 2017 bull market here, that was, this was the longest run here and the most volatile, almost the most parabolic, almost borderline vertical move was literally right at the end of the bull run. So that means we could very well see something very similar to that. Whether or not it's extended, it doesn't really matter. I think, whether, we see some more gradual stair stepping here, and then towards, sometime next year, then we see that massive run up, or maybe we're about to see the massive run up towards the end of this year, towards somewhere around like 180 at low as 200, 230, 250, maybe even upwards towards 300,000 by the end of this year or very early next year. But look here at this monthly chart again, we can see here the all-time Fibonacci retracements that I've pointed out plenty of times. I think this is one of the biggest things that I've gone over and continue to go over, because we continued to see each of the requirements met that pertains to the historical behavior you can derive from each of these retracements. But really it all boils down to the fact that the 272 here has always been met in a proximity, and the fact that that has yet to have been met leads me to believe we will see Bitcoin come up to somewhere around $200,000 to $250,000, more likely than not within this year. Like I said, maybe even going into early like Q1 of next year, depending upon if things extend. Although one of the things I've picked up on within the last 6 months to a year is the very fact that Bitcoin has continued to surprise me and go against my initial expectations of the fact of just how drawn out this bull run has been. And I'll always, even as I've mentioned it on here, been cognizant and aware of the fact that these bull runs are increasing in duration over time, such as the bear market's doing the same thing. But the amount of lollygagging that this bull run has done is, I think, it's taken myself by surprise, and it's taken a lot of other people by surprise as well, especially considering the fact that there's so much institutional inflow into Bitcoin, and I mean even Ethereum at this point, and the other blockchain solutions that have ETFs or will within the next few years get ETFs as well. We're seeing this increasing institutional adoption and integration and interest in the real world space, but yet we're seeing the bull runs becoming more methodical, more strategic, more calculated, and just overall kind of more structured in like a cautionary sense, rather than back in the past. Obviously, each of these runs here were just buck wild, rampant, insanely, have a lot of vitality in terms of just the fact that they're just going they're going full throttle with very little and short-lived retracements. Whereas obviously in this bull run we've seen small bump up, sideways for 6 months or so, bump up, sideways again for another 6 months or so, and then here we see this bump up, another sideways of 4 months, and then a small bump up. Like I said, it's been very methodical, gradual, calculated and measured compared to the buck wild vitality of the previous bull runs. We're also still seeing here with the RSI still sitting right here in the median. This is again kind of going to be one of those indicators that is conveying the idea that Bitcoin is not topped out yet, because every time Bitcoin's topped out in the past, it's been above this uppermost yellow line here of the median, and we have yet to see Bitcoin get above that. There's a strong support here that's still intact on the RSI, which resembles very much so what happened in 2016 to 17, which is again why we might see a final, just major, mind-melting, face-melting move towards the upside that takes Bitcoin well over $300,000 over the next 6 months, maybe pushing a year. I'd have to imagine that if there is an extended bull run, it won't push too much longer or for past like 2026 or so. But I mean, there's also still the chance that we see Bitcoin slowly build all the way up towards $1 million with no major bear market going into 2030 or 2032 or so. I mean, that just might be what is happening, what we're actually seeing here. And also, I mean, if we look here at the stock RSI, the stock RSI is comfortably in this upper bound, showing nice bullish bias. I mean, we could definitely see this continue to move up higher here as we see the RSI then move up. The MACD looks good here as well in a bullish stance, could definitely continue to go higher. The RVI on the monthly this is another one of the top indicators here. You can see getting above this oversold line here has always happened with prior all-time highs. We have yet to see that here within the current bull run. If you look again, this is going to be the accumulation distribution of the open interest money flow index. That's this indicator down here. You can see the pi cycle indicator up here as well. Like I said, that hasn't been signaled yet. We're actually quite far from it being signaled. I'll get to that in a moment, but if you look here, this indicator down here, the money flow index indicator, this will show the accumulation and distribution, has yet to get above the value around 53 to 54. You can see here with each of these purple zones here that this is always indicated all-time highs. It's been synonymous with the pi cycle high. We haven't seen that happen yet. And if we look here at the pi cycle indicator, whenever we do see this high printed here, it's when we see the white line here go above this upper bound here of the, let's see, what did this say? That's going to be when we see the high short moving average go above the high long moving average here, is whenever we do see this high printed here. And if we continue to see this upper moving average here in purple move up at the same slope, and let's say Bitcoin tops out somewhere around like late November, early December, that would put Bitcoin topping out somewhere at $213,000 or higher, because you can see the price has historically, like here, it went higher than that upper purple line. It went higher here, such as here. So if we take here this high long moving average here, somewhere at around 213 or higher sometime around like November, December this year, or even if we push it towards like let's say mid-October, it's around basically $200,000. I mean, at this point, if we see the Pi cycle high printed once again, this is indicating, assuming that, I mean, even if just this same gradual slope here is held, it might even start to ramp up higher than that. Basically, it's just indicating that we're going to see Bitcoin set its all-time high significantly no lower than $200,000, which lines up with a lot of the other information and the data I've gone over in this video and I've gone over in my past videos. Look here at this bi-weekly chart, which the past chart here was also a bi-weekly chart. You can see down here on the RBI, each time Bitcoin has set an all-time high here at the end of cycle 1, here at the end of phase 1 of cycle 2, here at the end of phase 2 of cycle 2, and then what we're coming into, the upcoming all-time high, I believe, somewhere, so, you know, obviously who knows what's going to happen right now. So linked to sometime later, just within the rest of this year, maybe early 2026, I'm starting to extend it to there. But just in general, I still obviously think that there's still room to go to the upside, significantly speaking. I don't think Bitcoin has hit its all-time high yet. And we have also seen each of these two peaks for the past instances of bull runs. We have seen one peak for the current bull run. We haven't seen the second peak, which again is indicating that if this is going to hold, which it's been a fantastic indicator for the all-time highs of Bitcoin's bull runs since January of 2011. So for over 14 years at this point, we've seen that this indicator has basically precisely predicted the all-time highs associated with the second peaks of each of these double peak portions here that go into the oversold territory of the RBI indicator here. And even down here with these orange zones, these descending trends here, this also predicts the all-time lows as well. Correlated with each of these orange price arcs here on the actual price chart, you can see that the price here is, each of these have an ascending structure throughout the years, whereas if you look down here on the RBI, as I shown, these have an ascending structure. So we always see these orange, as at least they're highlighted in orange, these price arcs here with an upwards orientation, whereas on the RBI we see a descending orientation. So we see not only these double peaks here for the all-time highs with the RBI to price, but we see these double lows in comparison to price that shows a hidden bullish divergence that has indicated the all-time lows, which again is going to be synonymous with each of these pi cycle lows as well to further strengthen that signal, that indication. Now lastly here, again, as always, just to end things with the alpha and omega chart, the 12-month chart, the yearly chart, the analysis here, the trend of each of these candles, we can see starting from inception, where we see one bear market candle, then we see 1, 2, 3, 4. Next bear market candle, 0, then we see 1, 2, 3, then the rinse and repeat, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Obviously, with the exception of the deviation here within these 4 bull market candles back in Bitcoin's earliest days, where it truly was a youth, had a lot of vitality, and was genuinely buck wild and just unrestrained, bullish, force behind it. Whereas now, again, like I said, we're starting to reach more mature years where we see this institutionalization, this fundamental landscape, this overall adoption in terms of the technology, and we've seen this stabilize out to each of these 3 bullish years here, going all the way back to January of 2015. So we're seeing over 10 years a stabilized bull market of 3 bullish candles for each of these times, and the current candle, this year of 2025, is that 3rd candle, which means that this is the year, according to this, if it's upheld, that we'll see Bitcoin top out, or maybe we see a deviation again and we see a 4th candle here, which would put us at peaking in for the all-time high in 2026. But if the uptrend also here is held in correspondence with this temporal trend of these 3 to 4 bullish candles, then we would see Bitcoin again move anywhere upwards towards 170, upwards towards $240,000, $250,000. If 2026, then we'd see anywhere up to $200,000, upwards towards $300,000. So, I mean, really, I think to really sum this up, I think the most reasonable range for an upcoming all-time high for Bitcoin, assuming that it has not already topped out, because it's totally possible that it has topped out, but assuming for various good reasons that it hasn't topped out, then it seems that the most reasonable range for Bitcoin to top out in would be at lowest somewhere approximately $170,000, give or take like $10,000, upwards towards 200,000, 250,000, 300,000, and anything above 300,000. If we see that, I think that's going to be corresponsive to two scenarios. Either we just see it's an insanely face melting, borderline vertical parabolic rise in a relatively short period of time, like no later than early 2026, or we do see that extended bull run leading into like 2028, 2030, 2032 or so, or we see Bitcoin push above 300,000 towards 500,000 towards a million by sometime around 2030 to 2033. But that was really all that I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but all that being said and everything else gone over, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.